Okay, this is our paper on Norman Bowker, and the gist of the paper is that Norman Bowker he fought in the war, but he had a lot of survivors guilt after the Vietnam War, and this was all in our book that we've been reading, the things they carried. So yeah, he had a lot of survivor's guilt because he had one friend that died, and he blames himself for his death. So his name was Kiowa, and he, along in the book, he references a lot that he basically blames himself for Kiowa's death. So first, what we can probably do is just go around and kind of point out stuff and explain it as we go. So you want to go first with maybe the purple heart? I don't know.
Sure, I'll start with the Purple Heart. So he was awarded a lot of medals due to all the service that he did and how many people he saved and all the great things he did. But he kind of regretted having them, or he felt like he didn't deserve them because of all the things that happened and the people he lost. And so one of the awards that he had was the Purple Heart, and his father talks a lot about how he was like, oh, you did so many things, you have 7 medals, like this is so great, like this is such a big deal. But he couldn't appreciate them because of how much he lost. And so yeah, that's kind of our main point with that. And like
maybe the quote too.
Yeah,
can you read it?
Okay.
Okay. It's okay. Okay. So the quote that goes along with the Purple Heart says, "Though it wasn't much of a wound, and did not leave a scar, and did not hurt, and never had." And if maybe I should just mention it that the Purple Heart is earned by getting wounded in battle. So he almost says that like it was like getting like a Band-Aid. Like he didn't really. I'm assuming that in his head he thought you had to get like seriously injured to earn the Purple Heart, but he just got a small injury, and yeah. So another thing that he writes above that we wrote above that is that this is talking about his father and the medals, and he says he would have explained to his father that none of these decorations was for uncommon valor, they were for common valor, which is basically him again, kind of the survivor's guilt coming in, where it's like he doesn't think that he's worthy of the medals, but he's also kind of saying that, and this is something that we've seen along in the book, is that he kind of shows that the medals really mean nothing to him. It's really, again to him, especially he has one where it's the combat infantry. Well, he got a silver star. He got a silver star, which is earned by like heroic actions in battle. But
trying to save someone, and like the gold one, the next level, quote unquote next level up, is like actually saving them, or like putting like completely your life on the line and like saving them from like death. And he got a silver for trying to save his friend, even though he couldn't completely save him. And so that's kind of another part of his guilt. He's like, oh yeah, I just have a silver, I just didn't complete it, So that's kind of his idea.
Yeah, so another thing maybe you can see in the eyes is that inside of his eyes, and maybe another thing that's worth mentioning is that this entire paper, all of his body is supposed to be how he sees himself. So when he looks into his eyes, all that he sees is Kiowa's hand. So in his eyes, there's a little bit of mud, and you can see his hand reaching up out of the mud, and that's symbolizing Kiowa like reaching out for kind of trying to be saved, and he was unable to save him. There's another quote that goes along with that, and he says, "If it was possible, which it wasn't, he would have explained how his friend Kiowa slipped away that night beneath the dark swamp field. He folded into the war. He was part of the waste." So he's basically saying that like he just caused his friend to become just another casualty in the war.
Yeah.
Here, you want to do the lake or just explain the lake? Yeah. Okay.
So going into like his kind of mindset and his kind of thought process, almost every day, I think he drove around this lake constantly. Like it was a 7-mile trek, and it was a beautiful scenic lake. It was part of his town. It's part of like his childhood, a big part of his life. But all he could think about really while he was driving was his experience in war. And so in the picture, it's a lake, it has the field, and it's like the road around it, and then there's like a tornado in the beginning, and like it looks picturesque until you see the tornado, and it's kind of describing like how he can't find peace even though he's in such a peaceful place. He can't find his like own satisfaction or like purpose because he's remembering the war and remembering all the like destruction that he's seen. And so the quote that goes along with it is...
You go ahead. Yeah. All right, the lake lay before him, flat and silver. The evening was smooth and peaceful. Just a mild, pleasant summer evening. He thought about how he had been braver than he ever thought he could be, but how none of it mattered now because it was invisible to everyone but himself. So this is... Well, number one, I think one thing that's pretty cool is that not only is the tornado talking about, like, kind of like the chaos, but the tornado spins in circles, which is kind of how his mind was. His mind was in circles. He wasn't really thinking straight. again, all kind of coming back to the survivor's guilt. So one thing about this that we haven't mentioned yet is that also, especially that we've learned in class, that the Vietnam War did not have a very high public, what's the word
like
for it?
Public view or public like opinion. It wasn't favored. Like
It was not publicly favored much. So that's why he says that none of this mattered. And when he means none of it, what he's talking about is all of the stuff he's done to all of the sacrifices he's made for himself. And he's saying that this doesn't even matter because no one really cares. He was invisible to everyone but himself.
Yeah, and the lake is such a big part of his childhood, where he talked about like, oh, we would talk about like our purpose and like what our goals were in life, and he's like, none of that really mattered compared to like what he's gone through now. And so that's kind of like his way of describing his past compared to his present.
Yeah, okay, so the next thing we can talk about is his body, and I'll explain it first and then go over the quotes. So one thing that we did, again, remember that we drew this as if Norman Bowker was like looking into a mirror, like how he sees himself. Like in Harry Potter, when they look in that mirror and it's kind of like they see what they really are. So here he has this military uniform that you can see on here, all the camouflage pattern. We have the boots here. So, but you actually will see all these patterns or these patches. And for one, these are all the jobs that he carried out after the war. So in the book, it mentions that, I can read the quote, he had worked briefly as an automotive salesman, janitor, a car wash attendant, and a short order cook at the local A&W fast food franchise. However, none of these jobs, he said, lasted more than 10 weeks. So that's kind of, I think the fact that they don't last more than 10 weeks is really just like showing the patch. Like, although he has these patches on him, it's still, his military self is still very true and alive. And especially, in the book, he goes to the drive-thru and they were speaking in like military terms, and it just kind of goes back to him. So this just shows how like he's like really, because of all his experiences in war, he kind of like lives and breathes the military outfit. Yeah. Okay, you want to talk about the car keys?
Yeah, sure. So the car keys kind of represent him, like he holds dear his car and being in the car and driving around this lake all the time, because it's kind of his only comfort while the time that he's been home. And so he constantly is driving, like we talked about, around the lake, and he really only finds peace or finds comfort driving at night and driving around and around and around, and that kind of cycle. And so the quote that says, Norman Bowker. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Norman Bowker followed the tar road on its 7-mile loop around the lake. Then he started all over again, driving slowly, feeling safe inside in his father's big Chevy.
And it kind of like also talking about like how his father's relationship with him kind of also kept him from like branching out or like getting out more and like being part of the community again because of his experience in the war. And so his father kind of sheltered him from that and talked to him about his war and his experience, and how he was still kind of felt trapped in this car and like going around in this cycle of continual like not being able to.
Yeah, like literally, like we said, going in circles.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a few more things on his body, and one of them right down the middle is a broken spine, and this is one of my favorite symbols that we have on this paper. And really what that symbolizes is once he came home from war, legitimately he was free. He had freedom. He was not restrained by anything. For example, when he was in war, he couldn't desert, but now that he's home, he's free, war's over, he is free. However, his broken spine resembles how he's paralyzed. And this kind of also connects to how he couldn't work jobs for a long time. And this is just basically saying that although he's free, he really isn't free. He's still restrained. And this is all because of his survivor's guilt. Again, his mind's in circles. He's not thinking straight. So really, just all this damage that the war has done to him, not physically, but not just, really barely any physical damage, but a lot of like psychological damage. Yeah, is there anything else you want to say about that? I think that's...
No, that's good. I was just
the heart too.
The heart and Sally are the two things that we don't have quotes on, but are really important to him. So we did a heart with a American flag to represent like how much he loved the military and how much he loved this life that he was in. Even though it was war, he still he cherished that community and that sense of pride. And it's not in the red, white, and blue colors because we wanted to symbolize how much of a toll it took on his health and body and mind and all these things. And so we kind of it's kind of overshadowed and kind of showing this darkness inside of him, even though he loves it so much. And then Sally, she is his like high school sweetheart, and she is, during the war she got married and is not part of his life anymore, but he still thinks about her, and he still like thinks about a life that he could have had with her. And so that's we have a picture of her because he talks about the picture of her in his wallet, like that he used to carry around. So that's like just a big part of him.
Wait, and just one more thing I want to add about the heart is the fact, one of the reasons again that it's in gray is because it kind of resembles his mixed feelings about the U.S. Because obviously he feels patriotic, and fighting in the military was a big piece of his life, but he also kind of has like conflicting thoughts about it, because yes, it shaped his life, but it also kind of did a lot of damage for him, and he kind of knows that. So again, that just kind of shows like the conflicting aspect of it, but again, it's in his heart, showing that no matter what, he knows it's like a very important piece of him.
Yeah.
So yeah, we talked about Sally, and then there's one thing down here, and you'll see his shoes. On the very bottom of his shoes, they have mud on them. And the quote that goes along with, really, this is what this resembles is the field that he talks about the night that Kiowa died. So in that field, he talks about how it was very muddy and it was full of manure. So, and he also mentions that you couldn't lie down, not for long, because you'd start to sink under the soup, real clammy. And basically what this is just saying is how the dirt was everywhere. And also, I think this can also symbolize just like, again, like I said, kind of the damage that the war has done to him, not just physically, but like psychologically. So it's almost like this, this mud is still on his shoes. It kind of symbolizes like this, how the war is he's still carrying the war with him, in one way or another.
Yeah.
And there is one quote up here we missed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the quote that goes along with the spine says, "There's no place to go, not just in this lousy little town. It's almost like I got killed over in Nam. Hard to describe. That night when Kiowa got wasted, I sort of sank down in the sewage with him. Feels like I'm still in deep shit." So, basically, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of goes along with the shoes. Like, he's still stuck in this place, and he still has these memories that constantly like control him and control his mind. And they're constantly, he still thinks he's in this muck, and he's still like in this like stuck place. And yeah, kind of goes along with like his paralyzed, and that his feet are still stuck in the mud that he was in when he was in Vietnam.
Yeah, and then the main one thing that I added that I really do think is cool, and it might not show up in this, so I'll add a picture of it. But for all the background of this paper, there's kind of some scribbled lines, and some of them are more erratic and some of them are more smooth. And this is kind of symbolizing his suicide note that he wrote. So the quote at the top says, "The letter covered 17 handwritten pages. It's tone jumping." So again, that's kind of why like some parts are more erratic, some are smoother. But yeah, this is just showing his suicide note and kind of the weight that it carries on him, especially on the author of the book, which is Tim O'Brien, because he talks about how Norman Bowker's death took a big toll on him. And then the last quote that goes along with this is at the end says, "Norman Bowker, who later hanged himself in the locker room of the YMCA." It's basically saying Norman Bowker, who later hanged himself in the locker room of the YMCA in his hometown in central Iowa. And then at the bottom, I signed it with his signature. So, yeah, this is just kind of showing that over everything he has just like letter behind him, which is, I feel like it's kind of sad, but you could almost think of it as like kind of how he's remembered, like his legacy behind him. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add to that?
His like final piece is like him writing this letter and kind of getting his story out there, which is like a big part of what he struggles with during his entire section of this book.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.